What's going on, everybody? Good evening. We're making videos a little bit later than I usually like to, but it's Monday after a game. You're going to have a lot to say. And there's a lot to say after yesterday's game, and now we got to take a look at Pro Football Focus once again. Got to take a look at how they felt about the defense. So, first of all, let me reiterate this video. Me doing these videos does not mean that I always think PFF is right, nor do I always think PFF is wrong. I think a lot of people will assume one of those two things, and it's not that simple. I think there are some things that PFF doesn't really do a good job capturing, but overall, I think they do a lot of good work in trying to shed light in certain areas. So understand that this is not an endorsement of everything PFF says, nor is it an attempt to dunk on PFF and say they don't know what they're doing. Also, if you like this video, please click the thumbs up button down below, subscribe to the channel if you're new, click the bell for notifications, become a channel member for $2 a month. Those are the best ways to help support the channel. All right, so right away, I mean, we're just gonna have to say it. We're gonna have a big disagreement here because our two highest graded defenders and the one player on this whole team that was graded out really well, they're both linebackers, Dodson and Baker. Dodson gets the 83, and you can see how well-rounded his scoring is. Jerome Baker gets graded out pretty well too. He gets dinged a little for coverage, admittedly. But those are your two best defenders? Yeah, right off the bat, I'm not buying that. I actually think the linebackers in this game were mostly pretty. There were some areas of strength, right? Like they were very effective on the blitz. They got a lot of pressure in this game. PFF did capture that, by the way. But that's not even the main reason why they're scoring high here. If you look at the run fits in that Giants game, I think the linebackers were by and large disastrous. I didn't realize how bad it was when I made that initial post-game video, but when you really dig into it and you look at some of these run fits, they're not getting it done. Now, some of it is because they don't have Byron Murphy up front to take up the blocker's attention, but there are linebackers in this league that are able to take on blockers and shed the block, and these guys are not really doing it, and how that doesn't count against them in this circumstance, I don't know. Now, I think Baker's grade is somewhat defensible. They did correctly ding him for coverage stuff, but Dodson being this high doesn't make any sense to me at all. Like, this to me is just a miss. I don't know what this is. This is a very confusing moment for me. And I think it does represent the weakness in PFF scoring. More on that a little bit later, but keep in mind that Dodson and Baker played the whole game as we go forward in this video. Jarran Reed scored out well, mostly because he was very successful as a pass rusher, got many hurries in on Daniel Jones. I guess that's understandable. I mean, I don't think he's doing a bad job. He's just not equipped. He's just not really equipped to do the things that we need somebody to do when you only have two down linemen. Derek Hall grades out quite well, which I think is deserved. He had a sack that he didn't really deserve it because Daniel Jones just fell down in the pocket, but Derek Hall played a pretty good game to my eye. I think that's fair. You got Reek Woolen scoring quite well here, which I imagine his coverage numbers are going to be pretty clean when we get to those. I mean, he's hard to pick on, right? He's hard to pick on. He had maybe one not so great moment tackling in this game, but other than that, I thought it was good. Draymond scores well. Run defense and tackling is pretty well scored. Kind of notable because he's the guy that people like to pin a lot of blame on. He's the guy people hate on. Julian Love, okay score as well, I would say. Coming back from an injury, I feel okay about that. Nwosu was scored passably, and that's kind of the cutoff point for guys who scored well. Everyone else in this game was basically anonymous. Witherspoon and Pritchett were both about average. Leonard Williams, very forgettable, mostly because he missed a tackle, which when you're a deep down lineman and you only get a few chances to tackle per game, you can't really blow your tackling opportunities. A lot of that going around, by the way. Gibson kind of starts to slide into players that are decidedly below average who really didn't get it done. Ray Sean is here mostly because of the bad tackling, which makes sense, although, again, he has a cast on his arm, so it's a little understandable. Mike Morris, he's just not they don't like him very much, and maybe this is telling us why he's not getting a lot of playing time. So Mike Morris scores poorly. Hankins scored really poorly, which I'm going to just say it. I don't really agree with that. He did miss a tackle, and that's obviously an indictment on him, but I don't think the defensive line played all that poorly in this game. I think that they're being put in bad situations, and the linebackers are really the ones who are probably making the bigger mistakes right now. Trey Brown, horrible. Although it is worth noting that he did have remarkably high scores in run defense and tackling, which is hilarious. His coverage grade was so bad it canceled that all out. Kayvon, terrible. Miles Adams, really bad. Like, wow. I didn't know this was possible. And let's count up the missed tackles here. Now the good news is the only guy who missed more than one tackle in this game was Rayshawn, and Rayshawn has the cast, so I get it. The bad news is it was still double digits. Hall missed a tackle. Love, Nwosu, Witherspoon, Pritchett, Leonard Williams, Hankins, Wallace, and Adams all had one. Excuse me. So, I mean, it's not the worst, but it's certainly not the best. Like, I'm not thrilled about a game where you miss 11 tackles. That's something that is working against you, ultimately. It's not the worst. I've seen worse, but, I mean, I don't want to see worse. Let's put it to you that way. So let's look at the run defense grade specifically. And first of all, let's talk about how funny it is that Trey Brown has by far the highest run defense grade on the team. But here's my thing. So Jerome Baker has 8 tackles on running plays in this game. 6 of them are qualified as stops. And a stop is basically any run play where the tackle is made short of a successful play. And what constitutes a successful play depends on the down and distance. So it's basically a measure of, was your run tackle a successful run tackle or a run tackle that you just made that was like you made the tackle, but are we really all that impressed? So Baker, 8 tackles against the run, 6 are constituting a stop. And he also forced the fumble technically. I don't really know how much he did to force it, but he technically got it. Average depth of tackle on these plays, 2 yards down the field. So this is where I say, okay, Baker getting scored well. I can kind of buy that, even though I don't think he did very well in coverage. Even though I think that there are some run fit moments that are not good for him. I can kind of see why they graded him strongly here. But Dodson had 1 tackle, 1 tackle and 1 assist on a run play all game, and only one of them was constituting a stop. You're playing 72 snaps out there. The Giants were running the ball plenty, and you're getting 2, let's call it 2 run stops in the whole game. That tells me, and the tape backs this up, you are missing, you're filling the wrong gap. And that's why I can't really buy this grade for Dodson. Like, they gave him a 71 pretty much. And given the numbers they have to back it up, it doesn't really make sense to me, right? Like Baker, okay, I get it, right? That makes sense. 8 tackles, 6 are a stop. 2 average depth of tackle. His stop percentage in this game was almost 20%, right? But then you look at some of this other stuff, and I don't know. It just doesn't really line up here. Like, you've got notable Reek Woolen up here pretty high. But then you've got like Draymond Jones getting a good run defense grade, even though he had the same basic numbers as Dodson. And actually worse, because one of his run tackles came on a play that went for well over 10 yards. He had an average depth of tackle of 8. So, I don't know. I'm not really buying what this is selling. I have to admit, I think that Dodson being the highest graded defender on this team is a joke. And coverage is part of that too. But we also got to talk about this run defense stuff. It's not good enough. All right, so I already talked about the pass rush. It's better than I thought it would be, but this is PFF. Remember, they're very generous. Reed was the one standout, and Hall also did quite well. It is worth noting that Hall did not get a good pass rush grade despite getting 4 pressures, which, I mean, maybe you can learn something from that. That probably tells him that, there were some opportunities to get sacks that he didn't get. They're probably not giving him a lot of credit for the sack either, because that sack was a final Well, it was the play where Daniel Jones just fell down and fumbled the ball. So he shouldn't necessarily get a lot of credit for that. Other than that, Baker and Dodson both sacked the quarterback and they both had another pressure. So that's good. Draymond had a pressure. Big Cat had a pressure, which, given how much he was out there, yeah, it's disappointing that he only had one in 29 opportunities. But first game back from an injury, I'm not going to trip on it too much. 15 pressures? That's not really that bad. Daniel Jones didn't drop back to pass an excessive amount of times, right? So our win rate is actually better than I thought it would be. Excuse me. Jeez. These allergies, man, they're killing me. But I think that there are too many plays where we get pressure, but Jones has already had the opportunity to make his read and make a good throw by the time we get it, where it's a very, like, it's a weak pressure, right? It's a pressure by the technical definition, but it's not having the impact on the play that you're looking for. All right. Coverage stuff real quick. The standout stuff would be Witherspoon actually kind of got picked on in this game. They threw at him 7 times, but it only went for 23 yards. So why Witherspoon is currently getting dunked on so much after this game, I'm not really sure. He did not grade out well on PFF overall. Gotta admit, I'm not really understanding why he did miss a tackle, but I'm winning at life if if the opposing quarterback throws the ball 7 times for a total of 23 yards. I just am. None of the plays went over 10 yards either. It's like, yeah, that's a proposition I'm taking. What else do we got? Pritchett actually held his own, 22 yards on 4 targets. I can live with that. Jenkins, 4 targets, 4 catches, 41 yards. We're getting kind of rough. Baker, a little bit rough as well. And this is why I say I think that they captured Baker's game correctly because of the struggles in coverage. I would say that I think there are things that Dodson is doing in coverage that are not good, that are not being captured by these numbers. So when I look at somebody like Dodson leading the team in coverage rating after yesterday's game, I just feel like that it's not capturing the right stuff, right? Like, yes, maybe technically Dodson only got targeted once and didn't allow any catches, and that's really good. But at the same time, I feel like there are coverage responsibilities that he's just not fulfilling that do not show up on a stat sheet like this. So this kind of stuff is complicated, right? It's complicated to talk about this stuff, especially when you're playing zone defense. Like, when you're playing zone defense all the time, which this defense currently is, you really have a hard time evaluating coverage responsibility. But my gut tells me that Dodson was not particularly good on Sunday in coverage. Now, I did save Trey Brown for the end here. I didn't even want to mention it because, I mean, you guys know, right? 2 penalties, 6 targets, 93 yards, a touchdown. Love gave up the other touchdown, but that was actually the only catch he gave up the whole game. And he wasn't the only guy who got picked on, but he was definitely one of the people that got picked on, and he just didn't have it. And, you know, I'm not going to back off anything I said about Brown. I think he's a good player. I think he's very capable of playing better than that. And I'm not going to sit here and get too twisted up about one bad game, but that was a really bad game. And by the way, back to my thing about Dodson. I mean, look at Kayvon Wallace here. He didn't get targeted once in this game, and they still gave him a really bad coverage grade. So PFF knows that you can not give up catches and still not be doing your job in coverage. So this, to me, just reflects some misunderstanding or misapplication of PFF grading, personally. So, yeah, not buying all of this, but some of this stuff's definitely interesting. And, of course, you know, when it's something like Trey Brown, that's a slam dunk for PFF. Special teams, real quick. Bobo, the highest rated special teamer. Don't forget about his value there. I know he's not doing a lot on the offense right now, but Bobo, very good special teamer. Trey Brown, for whatever it's worth, graded out very well. Chenault, same thing. The low grades on special teams would be Kayvon, which is troublesome because that's his main area where he can actually contribute right now. And then we have some other relatively anonymous grades. I will say special teams was a problem and is a problem for this team right now, and we're going to maybe talk more about that later. For now, I'm getting out of here, though. See you guys later. Probably not another video today, but maybe. But see you guys on Twitch later, and go Hawks.